All right, looks like we are live. Hi, my name is Moeeb Zar. Normally from this platform, we'll do quarantine.today. That stream will still happen later today at 4. Since it's Juneteenth and a lot of tech companies and other companies are giving employees the day off of freedom to go and study and learn more about race issues and injustices, I figured it'd be a good time to discuss what it's like for people who are of color in STEM fields, in science, technology, engineering, math, within the software industry, and just kind of go through what the history of contributions are of people that have kind of been erased from history, and try to better understand how we can be aware of what's going on within the workplace that others you just may not be aware of. And so this is going to be kind of a fluid discussion. I've got some awesome guests with us today. A couple of my old coworkers from my days at Citrix, Michael Alexander, Koshin Mariano, and Olu. And then also we have with us Jay, or as some of you may know him as Odd Jay, who makes awesome robot projects and is a awesome maker. So with that, I'm going to bring everybody in and let them introduce themselves. So I'll go ahead and start with Jay.
Hi, I'm Jay. I'm a self-taught maker from LA. I build mostly wearable companion robots and robotic projects, and I'm still expanding to make more and cooler stuff.
Awesome. Michael?
Hi there, my name is Michael. The majority of my focus these past couple of years has been on front-end technology. I've been within tech for the better part of maybe 13 years now. It's quite it's quite interesting now that I just reflect on how long that actually has been. And also now my focus has been shifting more towards community organizing as well. But I still focus on independent contracting to front end and mostly, and expand to full stack technologies as well.
Awesome. And Koshin?
Hi, my name is Koshin. I have been a software developer for a very, very long time, close to 20 years. Front end, back end. I've worked with a few of the people on here as well, Michael, Olu, Moeeb, and I'm happy to be a part of this and talking about Black.
And of course, Olu.
Hey, I'm Olu Ayandoshu. I am a software engineer. I think I've been in the industry for about 13 years, very similar to Michael. It's kind of weird reflecting on how long that's been. I work at a company called Circle CI, and I'm kind of all over the place with what I work on, but mostly most of my focus has been around front end. And yeah, I'm super excited to be on here.
Yeah, it's great having you guys. It's a little bit of a reunion. I think I learned like the most of what I know software-wise from y'all. Olu definitely pressed good habits into my work path. Right on. So how has everybody been like dealing with what's going on, coping? How's your work been? I should say, has your work been kind about all of what's going on? I know where I'm at, they've been very understanding of like how this affects, how you're working day to day.
For me, I think it's been very, very interesting to see how everybody's had to adjust. I know I've had a very, very hard time doing so. I think the nervousness around the pandemic causing a level of anxiety, working remote and having to go from being around people to working 100% fully remote also has challenges. And then on top of that, all the social issues that are being brought to the forefront definitely are, makes you feel like doing day-to-day stuff work-wise sometimes doesn't feel as important. So It's an adjustment, but you know, I try my best to adjust, but you know, it's been hard.
Yeah, I definitely feel that there's I took a week off to go be involved with what's going on, and then getting back into work and readjusting while like having space in my mind taken up by, you know, dealing with the pandemic, dealing with what's going on with our administration and with the protests. It's been hard to stay focused, and while like making sure that what I do work on or spend my time on still feels meaningful. Well, you know, you got to also be kind to yourself and take care of your mental space.
For sure.
Yeah. How have things been over at Circle C?
Yeah, for me, it's been an emotional roller coaster, to say the least. I think the past, God knows, weeks has been filled with anxiety. But I think I've been super fortunate, super blessed that it hasn't been super disruptive to what would be day to day. And I say that and I cringe saying that, because we're all just trying to work or trying to live our normal lives as a pandemic and as all of this is happening, as we fight for social justice and racial equality. But in terms of the work side of things, Circle C has been super gracious. I think there's been a lot of empathy, support from my direct team members, all the way up to the CEO. It's been shocking, but also not shocking at the same time. But yeah, it's been filled with anxiety, and I think for me, work has been the soft spot where it hasn't been. That anxiety hasn't translated to, and it's awesome.
It's good to hear. How about you, Jay?
For me, it's been more of it's actually really hard to kind of put into words, in my opinion, just because first it was COVID, which I don't work in I don't do this for, you know, all the robots and stuff. I don't do that for a company or anything. I actually work in manufacturing, so I have to go into the office to actually do my job. So during COVID, I was still on the front lines. I was still going to work. I was still doing my job. And then with all the racial tension and everything else that was going on, people fighting for equality and things, it kind of got overwhelming for a bit. And one of my coping mechanisms, it used to be the gym, but since the gym is closed, it's making stuff. So I've been like rapid prototyping like a madman, and just coming up with more and more stuff, keeping myself more busy, and just trying to keep up with the news without trying to get overwhelmed by the news. Just because it seems like every time I turn on like Twitter or like Facebook, it's like they killed another person, they tear gas protesters. It's an adjustment period for sure. It's a lot.
Yeah, that definitely like sums up, I think, like how a lot of people are feeling. It's a lot. There's so much, and it's hard to kind of parse through where to keep your head at. Yeah. So, Michael, what are your thoughts on how are things?
It's been a lot. It's been overwhelming. You know, this conversation and these questions, it reminds me of I don't know how family friendly this show is, so I'll keep it.
I don't give a shit.
Okay. So, just for quick context, is that I wrote an article 4 years ago in 2016, and this was in the midst of, as I would say, like the height of the original Black Lives Matter protests. And this is also before everyone, started to more fully validate Black Lives Matter as a movement. And during that time, I wrote an article for Mountain View Culture called Lambda Conf Fuckery, White Supremacy Under the Guise of Inclusion. And where I talked about how, and this is the time when Olu, Koshin, and you, Mohib, and I were all working together. And that was the time where we were learning about all of these all of these murders by the state, these murders of Black people by the state. And it was, I mean, just as what Jay was describing, is how a lot of us were feeling and thinking, just 4 or 5 years ago. We tried to relate to each other. So the coping mechanisms that have helped is finding, community. And we saw how a lot of folks were jumping on Zoom. And I mean, for those who were in privileged positions who were able to work from home, we do need to acknowledge that part as well. We are more privileged than other folks who didn't have that ability to be forced to go to work every day. But finding through community, talking those things out, reading has helped for me. Reading more, digging into more of the theory of why things are the way that they are, that has helped. And just really slowing down. I mean, in the context of the pandemic, it has been just obliterating communities and people due to these systems that are just terrible and that don't really put people first. So I think that as part of that is to know that it has helped to reconfigure like what it is that we're doing and why we're doing it. So that can, really, so we start to learn that a lot of the things that we didn't think were possible are possible. A lot of the things that we think that were probably unnecessary is true, and that we can focus and reconfigure our politics and our work around health and safety instead of profit.
Yeah, so on that, like, in terms of community, what do you think would be helpful, right? So we talk about people who are fortunate to be able to work from home versus people who aren't, and how that affects how people work in tech. Like, what kind of stuff is out there for people who are dealing with experiencing all of this and still having to go into a workplace? And like, for me, I've found it helpful to cope through Twitter. And I actually don't. So I think back to when the first Black Lives Matter protests happened, I wasn't as active or like involved in it as I feel now. And I think that's because it wasn't as much in my face. I think there was a point at which Twitter broke and just became this flood, right, of people sharing information and just seeing all these communities rally together online to spread information, to spread infographics, to be like, here's what's really going on, where you're going to see it until you start to feel something and feel like you need to get involved. And it wasn't, if that hadn't happened, I don't know that I would have gotten as outraged as I did, because I didn't when the first BLM protests happened. And I think about that a lot, just why I wasn't as involved now. And so I'm also seeing people that I would never have seen before get involved, try to like include people in conversations, people who aren't afraid to use their tech platforms to be real. Because there was always that fear, right? Like, I might get fired if I tweet about something very honestly. And I know, Michael, you've always been vocal on Twitter and on your platforms. And so it's that whole, like, I think people are realizing that this is not so much even about politics anymore, as much as human rights, and opening their eyes to, like, if this is happening and it's happening everywhere and they've never noticed it's happening around them and you don't notice it. So maybe all these other things people are talking about, like things that happen in the workplace, things that happen in various organizations and hierarchical structure, these things are happening. What people have been talking about and trying to get people to listen are happening. So, like, are there any like experiences that you want to bring to attention in terms of dealing with kind of being silenced at work or professionally? That's a question to open to everybody.
So I can, I think if you're from an underrepresented group in tech, I've been in the industry for a very, very, very long time. like close to like 17 years. And I can tell you personally that, when I first started, you get either, indifference, right? Where people just will tell you that they don't really see, like, you'll either get, we don't really see color or anything, or outright hostility. Like I've had people tell me that I was a diversity hire, or say things like, or not even take my ideas into account, and I would have to be heard by talking to another, like by feeding my ideas to another engineer who was maybe white, and then getting those ideas accepted by the manager. So I think I've had, my competence called into question more times than I can count, and it's forced me to be extremely diligent and extremely vocal and calling those things out. And sometimes that doesn't always work to your advantage. Sometimes you have to actually quit jobs instead of, or you're passed over for promotions, or not actually mentored for senior engineering positions. And that happens a lot of the time. And I don't think, I think, a lot of the diversity and inclusion efforts are aimed at getting people in the door, but not necessarily mentoring them up through like the career ladder. So I would say, I'm sure everybody's been silenced. I've had, people make racist jokes at work, and then when you report it to HR, they do nothing about it. So it's, it happens. It's there. Like it's not just in policing that you see some of this stuff. It's in employment. It's through every field.
Yeah, I think a lot of what Koshin just mentioned is real life. Like the experiences he mentioned is things I can relate to, or I have experienced one time or the other. And he mentioned something that I think is important. I think one of the greatest scams out there is the term diversity, in my opinion. I think it enables us to check the box without actually putting in work to check the box. And when I say us, I think it enables a lot of organizations to do that. And my take on that is it's not enough to get an underrepresented person into the organization. That's not just enough. And I think, unfortunately, like lots of organizations stop there to be able to present fancy numbers out back to the world. Like I want to see more interesting things, like what kind of support do people of color have in those organizations? What kind of support do minorities have in those organizations? Do they have mentors? Do they have sponsors, right? Is the environment conducive for them to be successful? What's the retention rate? And I think, like, particularly for me now, wherever I work or whatever organization I'm close to, I think it's important for me to hold them accountable to that. I think a knee-jerk reaction, because we're fortunate in tech, with working in tech is the ability for us to see those things and sometimes just step away or go look for the next thing. But it's important to question it. Like I can write a book on what it means to be a Black man with a funny sounding name in tech, and for as long as I've been in, and it's not fun. It means a lot of times you got to work 2-3 times harder to be able to get the same recognition other people get easily. It means you'll be passed on for a lot of things, but I think the story is changing, and the story should change a lot more. And it's our responsibility now to push back a little bit harder in holding people accountable.
I'll say I definitely resonate with the whole, there's a couple of points that were mentioned, which is like, yeah, I feel you on the name thing. There's a lot of little things I feel like people do to kind of invalidate, right, your value. And I was saying earlier before we went live that for a long time, as well, my experiences are nowhere similar to being Black in tech, but being a brown person, a lot of times it was, I've heard the whole, oh, you're the diversity hire, which always like you'd try to laugh it off because someone would say it in the context of a joke, but then it would kind of hurt because I'm like, I feel like I got here on my merit, and I know I did, and I don't believe that my manager brought me in just to like check off a box, but then makes you wonder. And in regards to like resources being available, I wonder what's more helpful in terms of like, there's resources that help people who are marginalized within organizations, but I feel like there's not enough resources that are to make the rest of the environment safe and comfortable and even, right? It's almost like HR, like how often does HR actually help somebody deal with sexism, racism, and or just toxic work behaviors from others, right? A lot of times people are too afraid to even go there, right? There's that whole fear of if you speak up again, if you try to you're rocking the boat, right? So I'm sure like growing up, I was told not to rock the boat, to just make sure you kind of have to feel like you're sneaking by. And so in terms of that, what would you say, what are some ideas you think that like maybe you've seen work or not work in terms of making sure the people you work with or work under are being fair? Like, is there a way to hold anybody truly accountable in those environments? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, that's a good question. So I think something that's helped for me is forming community with other people, joining. Like, so there's a Slack group, I think, that I'm a part of, and they're active on Twitter. That code. So there's a Black woman founded a community for like engineers, like Black engineers, and like engineers of color to kind of like get together, and it's dope. And just being able to talk to everybody and have and share. Being able to talk through and see that your problems are not necessarily unique are extremely helpful. I think in terms of what you can do in an organization. So one thing that's important to remember is that HR in most organizations are there to protect the interests of the company, right? So they won't always give you they won't always advocate for the employees in most cases, right? They're there to prevent. They're there on the behalf of the employer. So a lot of times people have to leave organizations and sue. Like there are examples of people who've been sexually harassed. There was a message from Pinterest and where they're supporting Black Lives Matter, which I thought was admirable, but come to find out they did not, pay one of their employees who was a senior employee who was a Black woman, and she had to sue to get like fairly paid over a year, and and she's still fighting. So I think. So what can you do as an organization in tech? One, use your voice, because the good thing about being in tech now is you realize that no matter what, there are always more developer jobs or engineering jobs than there are engineers. So more than likely you will find something else. Two, make sure you prioritize your own mental health and actively interrogate the company's culture before you join. Say, what are your values? What are your beliefs? How many, and people are actually doing that now, asking, how many people are on your board who are from underrepresented groups? How many engineers do you actually have working for you that are from underrepresented groups? All those questions matter. So companies, by doing that, you're forcing companies to prioritize not just talking the talk, but actually walking the walk. And I think that's extremely important. You can make more change by choosing where you work, right? Like whenever a company behaves unethically, because with tech, finding engineering talent matters, right? Because engineers contribute a lot to the bottom line. So making sure that you can actually vote with where you work matters.
Absolutely. Also makes me think, like, so with that though, having a voice in a space, right? So how do you make sure you're heard? I think I always appreciated your managing style. So Koshin was my manager for years. And there's that whole being heard and knowing that you'll be heard. That was one of the reasons I joined the job I'm at now was they made it very clear from the interview process that I would be heard, that I would have a place and a voice, and that I was encouraged to speak up and like disagree often, right? And that was a huge factor, right, in joining. Versus where like you might think what a company is telling you in an interview process is performative, or they're making all these lofty promises, right? And then you get in there, and then you're treated second tier. You're made to work, but not really heard. And I do believe it does help, like you're saying, being able to be validated in the things that you're concerned about or maybe struggling through within a workplace. But I just don't know how to help people feel like they truly can speak, and whether that's something that are there managerial techniques to help ensure that?
That's a great question. I'll leave that to some of. I can't speak for everybody. I can speak for myself. I can say one of the things you have to do is it takes courage, because you're not always sure that you're going to get backed up. Like one of the things I always wanted to do when I led a team of engineers or worked with other engineers was, one, be able to advocate for them in a way that they felt like they were respected, right? And then two, make sure that if there is something that is wrong, to call it out immediately, because a lot of times silence just makes the problem worse. So yes, it is a risk, and sometimes it may cost you your job. I mean, like that's just the honest truth. And it may cost you opportunities that maybe you're not willing to lose, but ordinarily not doing anything just makes the problem worse. It just makes it where it continues into perpetuity. So for me, I would rather give up an opportunity but know I said something and know I advocated for somebody, than to just not do anything and let things pass. And sometimes that's really, really hard to do. And I think what you can do is, if you're in an organization, have allies. Make sure there are people that you can lean on and trust. And also, even though it's easier said than done, try to be at places where you know that you work on a team where at least the people people who supervise you or your managers can advocate for you. And if you cannot have that, speak up, even though it feels like you'll be punished from it. But more often than not, sometimes that can lead to real and lasting change.
Absolutely. So there was something Michael had said to me a couple weeks back, and he said something about be a comrade, not just an ally. I would love, Michael, if you could elaborate more on that idea of what that means and what that could look like in the tech community.
Yeah, sure. So, I think that what Koshin was talking about it's more of an extension of the conversations around allyship. When we think about allyship, we think about someone who may not be directly affected by these systems, may not be directly affected by how they are affected through hiring or through policing or through courts, or through missing out on pay increases and things like that. We think of it as an individual exercise. So like a lot of these things that we talk about are usually framed through a form of like individualism, and through like with some of the coping mechanisms that we talked about, like Koshin mentioned, that code, which was created by Anne Duramola.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, so a Black woman was very instrumental and very intentional in creating a community, creating a collective, a tech collective for Black folks to discuss and to share and to innovate in a place that is psychologically safe. I mean, we can share and talk more about psychological safety and safe environments. I have strong opinions about that. Perhaps Olu can expand on that. But so the importance of allyship is more of an individualist form of learning, but there is no accountability or collective ownership on how to progress in the long term. So, I mean, it's a good way to start, but to continue in the practice of liberation, of just upending and overthrowing these oppressive systems is through camaraderie, because that's through a collective of people. You know, a comrade is someone who holds that. I mean, uh, you don't have to actually even like your comrade, but as long as there's a shared understanding of political thrust and political goals. So I wanted to push back a little bit with you, Mohib, on mentioning how this may not be political. I think that this conversation is extremely political. These are conversations about the associations and the effects of power. And we're usually taught to be nice and to be polite and to not be political. And we know that being apolitical, especially in tech, is such a mythology, right?
It absolutely is. That's crazy.
Yeah. So yes, everything that we talk about, I mean, especially within technology and how it's used, like technology is not apolitical. So if I'm always saying like we need less allies and more comrades, because I want to share a political space with folks and to organize with folks. And that's where how we can find actual long-term sustainable progress. And things like I mean, you can use your voice, but that's still within an individualist framing. But if we shift more towards unions, if we shift more towards creating them and joining those unions and building that collective power, because I mean, as Koshin mentioned, I mean, HR is not for the employee, it's not for the worker. They exist really to just protect the organization and to mitigate litigation for the organization. They're not there for you. That's where unions come into play. So, if we want to build more safe environments and organizations, I mean, all the labor rights that we have were due to unions. They were due to getting in people's faces and not being polite. So, I mean, I always strongly encourage folks that to be less. I mean, once you start to go through those allyship, how to be an ally checklists and in books, now is the time to shift to join actual organizations who are training folks to build unions or to join unions, and to emphasize that. I mean, we've seen many examples of that, with NPM and other organizations where folks start to advocate for themselves, and organizations don't like that. So that's where we really need to push, is to build collectively, to organize as comrades, to share political space and less of a individualist kind of allyship framing.
Yeah, I agree with Michael a lot on a lot of things here. I think there's power in unions, and that power can be positive or negative. I think there's a great comment here on looking at the comment thread here on unions are how police got so corrupt. And I think there's sense there, but heavy is the head that wears the crown. I think that's a saying like I've heard a few times. With that responsibility comes great power, and you have to use it for positivity. I think like unions are powerful. I think there's in tech, it's going to be a tough fight. I don't know. Recently, there's like anti-union software going out from Facebook. Google is rumored to have some of those. Right? It's not gonna be a fair fight. But I think there's there's a step right behind unions, is the sense that if you're in an organization and there are minorities, the Black people, people of color, whatever minority group, come together as a community in that organization, because your voice together as a community far outweighs individual voices. There's a lot we can talk about in terms of building a psychologically safe team or whatnot. But I think that one of the biggest things is identify yourselves and come together as a community. Examples of what to do there, that's simple but not not a huge effort is, for instance, whenever any Black person or person of color joins my organization, I make it a point to meet them. And it's not easy. We're remote organizations spread around the world, but I make it a point to do so. And more so at this point, I'm starting to advocate for an actual group and organization where we can consistently gather and have a voice. So I think one of the most important things here is community. But also, as we grow as leaders in organizations, it's our duty, particularly being minorities, it is our duty just not to mentor. I can tell stories of mentors that I've had that have been impactful for me, but I felt could go a step further, but also to sponsor. And I think this distinction between sponsorship and mentoring is that a mentor is a coach, but a sponsor is someone that's proactively looking for opportunities for you to shine, proactively looking for opportunities for you to grow. So like for me, I think it's two things: community, like Michael said, like it's going to get to a point where unions will be a thing in tech. I pray for the day, I hope for that day. But now it's not a fair fight. And in the meantime, I think building a strong sense of community inside the org is the second, not second, maybe third best thing that can happen. Also, as we grow as leaders inside that organization, it is our duty not just to mentor, but also to sponsor. As we rise, let's pull up people. Let's pull people up and advocate for people proactively.
Thank you. That's fantastic. It makes me think, right? So on the subject of community, right? There's this idea of kind of spread out democratizing technology, whether it's within apps or software communities. I mean, we look at the open source world. It's led to where we are now, right? And like in terms of growth and really seeing that big companies have nothing on the open source community. What can be done with the decentralized community or global community is beyond necessarily what you can do in these restricted environments where people are pressured by various structures of hierarchy and like systemic oppression. I wanted to ask Jay about this. So Jay, only recently in the past few years, really, you've gotten involved in the makers community as like being like really up, I guess, visible. Jay's probably going to be humble and not mention this. He's been featured in Hackspace magazine and Make magazine for his projects, and has now become like pretty loud voice. So many people have been inspired by his projects. Want to see your take on what a community in general does for an individual, in particular the maker tech community.
At least in my opinion, it gives you like an extra family. Just from my own experience, I've been really quiet mostly because I've been raised to, talk what I know. And when it comes to making the world better and working with unions and stuff like that, I have zero knowledge, like none. So quiet. But for me, I'm used to being pretty much an introvert, because I'm not sure if this happens to the rest of anybody else out there. But for me, growing up, I really didn't fit in any of the circles growing up. I read too much to the fact that most of my friends called me whitewash because I spoke in complete sentences. Even like my own people in my family used to tell me that I think that I'm white because I had an interest in this type of stuff. And of course, I don't relate to anyone who's like really white because the whole bias thing. So I really keep it to myself when it came to that. But I kept teaching myself and like being really interested in computers and science and robotics to a point where I am now. And I still kind of have that small like fear in me where I can't really reach out to certain people or reach out to my family or reach out to things like that. And then I will take a chance. Like I took a chance not too long ago and posted how I felt on Twitter because during all the riots and stuff, and I was still going out to work, and literally by my job, we had the what do they call it? The guard, National Guard was like down the street from my job. So I was really scared going into work, and I brought one of my robots with me just to like make me feel a little more comfortable. And I posted about it, and I got so much like love from the maker community. Like a lot of people were just there giving me encouraging words, and like that was both very inspiring and humbling, and just made me really appreciate like the whole maker community in general. Yeah, that's just from my experience.
Yeah, definitely. It's that having that love from a large community that doesn't, I guess, base you off your of where you're from or how you look, right? It's about who you are, and it's hard sometimes to find that identity that's beyond just how you're born and about your work and how people appreciate you as a person. Brings me on another topic I want to throw in here about, because you had mentioned the kind of whitewashing that people try to do when you write. Like they try to say you're not acting white enough, or I felt in work environments that if I wasn't behaving like the normal expected white developer, that I wasn't fitting in. I was like pulling myself out of the expected norm, and having to deal with maybe changing my behavior or how I speak, which I felt hindered how I work. Right, as you know, as being a maker, you're part artist, part engineer, and the art part needs you to be able to be free and individualized in order to be able to work the way you do. So I was wondering what everyone's thoughts are on how they've had to change their behavior to suit an employer or environment, or even at like a tech conference or something.
I don't think I had this at a tech conference before, but I used to work for, this is pretty much a pamper company for babies, and my job was to be pretty much human resources type of job, answer phone calls, type of small stuff. But of course, the entire job was completely whitewashed. I was the only black guy on the team. And most of the day, I was answering phone calls of angry customers. And I noticed at least certain changes in my personality where I was afraid to say certain things or speak up at certain things because they expected me to fit into that role of being like, hey, he's the cool black guy. Yeah, you know, they try to turn you into the, hey, I have a black friend guy. And and it gets a bit frustrating after a while. Like for me, what ended up happening is I just got so sick and tired of it one day, and like the only like one person there, and he got a new job and just left me by myself, like your work best friend. And what ended up happening is I just stopped coming into work one day. Like I just couldn't do it anymore. Like it wasn't me. And what I ended up teaching myself, at least, was to stop really caring what people think, like 100% stop caring and just be myself, which really does kind of help because thanks to the maker community, I got my current job, which is a really nice job. Love my my company. I've been working there for about 2 years now. I think about to be 3. But last year during Juneteenth, I just came to work wearing this because I got bills to pay. But this year, I requested to have the day off. And I think it got up to the higher ups because I got an email and the entire company took Juneteenth off. And I'm like, this is the first time in my like life where I actually have Juneteenth off. So, but I think the way I got to that point was I had to call it being unapologetically black, where you're just pretty much yourself without the filters. Like, I'll go ahead and make a white joke. Not afraid of it. I don't go white people out in the forest. I don't trust y'all in the forest. I don't like horror movies because the black dude's gonna die.
That's good.
I am 100% me. I am not afraid to like. I don't want to be filtered. I don't want to be like that. I will make you laugh because I come off comedic, but I'm gonna be 100% with you the entire way. And that's like my biggest personal rule. Like, especially I think not I'll go ahead and put it out there and stuff. So I think the last time, because the last time someone actually called me, or told me they think that I was white, and last time was a family member of mine, and of course they were drinking, blah blah blah, and I forgot what happened, some serious political stuff, and they pointed me out because I was like just really getting, I guess, known in tech in that way. I'm still working on like robots and stuff. And they're like, well, you don't know about this. You probably don't care because you think you white. And I lost it. Like, you ever see those like TV shows where someone just adequately just destroys you with words, and with the entire like area is just quiet?
Yeah.
And I think that was like the last like mental straw for me. Like ever since then, I've just been unapologetic, just me. It's like this is what you get. I'm weird. Got goggles. Not afraid. I build robots. Hi.
And that's important. I think it's important to expand the definition of Blackness overall, right? Where you don't feel so confined. For me, I think being in tech, there's a bit of a monoculture in tech. At least it used to be like this before, where you would have to know certain white nerd things, right, to be accepted, like Dungeons and Dragons, having more than a passing knowledge of anime, knowing about Harry Potter, Star Wars, Star Trek, like speaking kind of like the lingua franca of tech, of what most white people in tech got you a little accepted more. But then afterwards, you get to the point where you're just like, okay, you can't keep up, right? Like you just have to, like Jay said, be unapologetically Black, be yourself, and just like what you like. A lot of times I've been in places where they assume everybody likes EDM music or something, and it's just like, okay, not everybody in tech is the same. You don't always have to be the same. We can all be individuals and still do good work and still have a great culture. I think a lot of times, there are studies around showing that whether, when cultures are more diverse, like engineering teams are more diverse, they actually make better decisions. Like things like that actually show you that, you can't have everybody the same. You get a lot of people trying to push this whole diversity of thought thing where we want everybody to look the same, but we want everybody to think differently. That doesn't work. So, I admire Jay for, for being unapologetically Black in a workspace. That's great, and we need more of it.
It's funny that you like mentioned that, because I was recently watching the new Ghost in the Shell on Netflix, and she actually says that like one of the main characters in the show, he's not a cyberhuman. He's full on like regular flesh and blood human. And he asks why he's on the team, and she explains to him that there's power in diversity. Like if the team wasn't diverse, they'll easily fall into the same traps and easily get like outthought or outnumbered or outplanned. And it's better to have an entire team of diverse people with different ways to come out of a problem. That way they never get caught and they never fall into like certain traps that will easily be made if they kept being the same team. So just from that. Another small piece of like entertainment that I do, at least for Juneteenth, this is how I celebrate Juneteenth. I watch all my favorite movies with like main Black characters. So something I noticed, which I always kind of talk about too, when I was walking around my companion robots, and I was taking them on a field test. Like my robots are built to wear, and they need to go out to see how they'll do. So one thing I do is like I'll take the bus, I'll hop on the bus and like just go to a friend's place, or like I'll just go downtown with one of my robots, just walk around and see people's reactions. And doing it around my neighborhood, I live in the ghetto, people see it and they instantly get hostile. Like they'll like judge it and be like, what is that? We're weird, blah, 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 blah. And this used to go on for a while, which I like had personal rules, like, okay, I can take the robot here, but I can't take it here, and that type of thing. But then when I say entertainment is such a big deal, Black Panther came out, and that changed everybody's perception. So for a while, I used to be like that weird kid with the robot, and then suddenly, after Black Panther came out, it became really big. I had random people just coming up to me like, Wakanda!
Like, Shuri was the Black engineer there. She was out here kicking ass. I was like,
that stuff really helps. Like, people don't really understand how big entertainment is and how much it goes to show like you being a normal person. Like my 3 movies that I plan to watch today, I already finished one. Is Black Panther, Spider-Verse, and Attack on the Block. And I love Black Panther because it literally just threw every black person in the world together for a good minute. Everyone was accepting of like people in tech, people in art, people with African traditions, people who didn't African traditions. Like it was, I used to go to the movie theater and just feel just love from everybody. Like people was passing out snacks, like don't even know you, but thanks for the chips. And then another one was Spider-Verse. Like I love Miles Morales, even when he first appeared in the comics. But the reason I like him so much as a character is because he's a normal kid. Like he's not, usually in movies with black main characters, they always make us stereotype to the point where we're either really badass, we're either like really funny, or we fall into some weird like stereotype trap. But like in Spider-Verse, you just had Miles be a normal kid. He wasn't like overly funny. He was fucking awkward talking to the girl. He trips over his own shoelaces. Like that type of normalcy as a character carries so much weight for anyone watching it. And a lot of time in entertainment, they don't really do that, especially with superheroes. Like characters like Luke Cage, like, oh yeah, I'm here to protect the block. So I'm only here to protect Rosecrans to Central. That's it. After that, I can't save the world. I'm here to save this one block area. And like, it's such a, like, it's not good. It's just not good.
I feel that with when it comes to like representation in film and media, there's that sense of please don't paint some stereotype. Just show like speaking in terms of like Pakistanis and Indian, like we really only have like 1 or 2 people that represent us in movies. And I'm thankful for Kumail Nanjiani because when he's in something, he's just a dude. He's not like some caricature. He's a dude reminding people that like people grow up. People are representing of like where they grew up, not like where they came from or where they're born necessarily, right? Like you're who you are and where like your environment. And I was making when you mentioned Black Panther, I remember this quote I found earlier from I might butcher this last name, Herman Shinery Hess, who's a software entrepreneur in Ghana. And he said, technology is the only way for Africa to get rich. We don't have proper infrastructure and we can't compete in manufacturing. But if you put me behind a PC and tell me to write software for a Chinese customer, then I can compete brain for brain with anyone trying to do the same thing in the US. There's this idea where, at the end of the day, everybody can do the same thing. If you're talking about something that's pure like software where there's a way to write code, well, different ways, but there's no limitations in terms of infrastructure or resources. It's what can you do with some code? What can you make? And you'll see that people can outshine each other without it having anything to do where they're from or their race. I do feel sometimes with, in terms of when they try to portray diversity, right, in movies or try to have a diverse character, and they try to, it's almost like some people don't care about other races unless they see them doing something of value, right? There's this idea if you don't see like, oh yeah, they're one of the good ones kind of thing, right? I'm sure everybody's heard that at some point, like you're one of the good ones because you did so well. And there are times where I think I was treated differently based on whether or not who I was behind the scene, right? That I was brown, right? They saw my code, but then I might have a completely different action if they see me. But I loved with, Black Panther showing, okay, here's an environment where like you take everything away. And if you just left black people alone for a while, yeah, they would have flying cars and like vibranium shit everywhere.
Well, I was thinking about that too. I had a conversation not so long ago with some of my employees and my boss, and we were talking about, of course, social type of stuff. We're talking about House, the old TV show back in the day. And we're talking about that if you had to choose your doctor for heart surgery and they gave you a choice between the white doctor or the black doctor, who would you choose? And of course, people gave their own opinions. And my opinion was I would, of course, choose the black doctor. And it's not because of his race or anything like that. I would choose the black doctor because the same thing happened to me when I was younger. And I was told by my grandfather, you have to work twice as hard to get half of what they got. And that stuck with me throughout my entire life, even to this day. That's why I throw myself into my work, and I work 10 times as hard as I can most of the time. And I know for a fact, if I was getting heart surgery with a black doctor, to even get that place, to even get there compared to his colleague, he had to work his ass off, never make a mistake, and be literally the best to even be considered to even do heart surgery. And it's that weird bias, thanks to race and racial stuff, that every time you see a person of color or other rich nationalities in a certain area, that they must be extremely good because of the fact that they're there in the first place. And I kind of feel like most of the time that's kind of true.
Yeah, for a lot of that, I mean, because what you're talking about is like a good topic on that covers that, which is medical apartheid, where we know the treatment of Black people, especially within the medical field, as patients are treated worse. We know that, take for example, high birth mortality rates for Black women are, I'd say, if I can remember correctly, it's 4 to 5 times more higher than other women who are giving labor. And a lot of that, I mean, it isn't due to reasons of health or things of that nature, but due to treatment from medical professionals. I mean, it's this idea that Black people don't feel pain. It's this idea that Black people are not human, and that Black people don't deserve care or empathy or understanding. So, I mean, it's okay to say like, hey, I'm a Black doctor, and you don't have to qualify that because it's not just because of his race, but because of this Black tax that this doctor had to pay to be exceptional within a white supremacist field. But through the understanding that a Black medical professional will more than likely, hopefully, exhibit and demonstrate the care and understanding that we are human, and this relates back to why a major reason of why we celebrate Juneteenth in the first place, because of this non-being, this thinking that we are not human, which justifies our enslavement, or which now is shifted to imprisonment. But to demand and to require folks who are Black to support you in health is necessary, because I mean, there are a lot of folks that say that, like, it's like going back to what we were talking about, like through allyship. I mean, there are people that who know the words, who know the social justice language, how to use it. But there's a big difference between that and its praxis, or in its practice, the practice of the theory of supporting folks in very real ways. So yeah, I mean, I think that there's definite history, context to treatment, into advocating for who treats you, because I mean, it's your very life that's in someone else's hands.
That's true.
Absolutely, yeah. On the subject of Juneteenth, I've seen like kind of mixed feelings about the whole tech companies giving the day off for people to go and teach themselves, or everybody getting the day off. And I was kind of curious to see what everyone's perspective is on like, what are the great things about like Juneteenth being like more recognized by everybody, and if you think it's just in like a response of like, I guess, mass white guilt, that people are like jumping on the bandwagon. There's a lot of that. Let's be real. Like, there's a lot of people doing things in honor of Juneteenth as a kind of like cop out, and there's a lot of good coming from it. And in reality, like, even myself, I don't know much about Juneteenth beyond the like Wikipedia tagline of like, this is in celebration of like emancipation, right? So just any thoughts you guys have on Juneteenth, what it means to you, and what you think is a constructive way for people to try to participate in it, even if they're not,
Well,
personally like as invested in the idea.
I guess I'll run with this. It's really weird to say because it's not like 4th of July where there's like fireworks and there's like a whole tradition of what to do to celebrate that day. For me, I've always taken it as a day to celebrate who I am as a person now and like things I like to do. And I guess in a lot of ways exercise my freedom to just be me. I don't really, that's actually really hard. I really don't know if it's like something you can really do to start celebrating something that's only recently become nationally known as Juneteenth. Like I taught my company about Juneteenth last year. They had no idea. Yeah, man, that's hard.
Yeah, I'm not a fan, honestly. I mean, and then with Jay mentioning how you're saying your company, the whole company got the day off, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So that's I hate the fuck out of that. It's a very just unfortunate space where we're gonna celebrate Juneteenth by giving white people the day off. So I mean, it's a lot of these rollouts of all these companies now celebrating and giving people the day off, with one not even acknowledging what the holiday is about, not acknowledging slavery, not acknowledging how it's connected to police violence, not acknowledging that how it all is a part of this overall structure of white supremacy and these multiple forms of systems of oppression. You know, how these structures of capitalism are literally killing us and the planet. So, I mean, Juneteenth is positioned as a form of like Juneteenth washing, you know, this form of co-optation of a Black celebration of liberation. Like this is about Black liberation, and now it's a overwritten as a form of like symbolic change of let's just celebrate together because, you know, all lives. It's a very like all lives matter rewriting and a form of like just white liberal form of trying to co-opt and overwrite Black liberation. So I do not support how these companies are rolling this out, because this was not about the symbolic change of a holiday. This is not about the symbolic change of murals, street murals, and a whole bunch of white people saying Black Lives Matter now. This is about shifting the resources and the supplanting, well, as far as supporting through very material ways of Black life. So, I mean, if folks want to talk about abolition, if folks want to talk about, well, not just talk about, but actual build steps towards abolition and destroying these white supremacist structures, let's actually engage that and do that instead of just saying, hey, take the day off and say Black Lives Matter, and, you know, let's go to a white sale and buy a mattress. So yeah, I'm not a fan, because I mean, this is always based in a form of representation, which is really just a silly form of tokenism. Jay has mentioned that, you know, like how being the cool Black guy and things like that. I mean, a lot of this really is just a form of tokenization, you know, and it's not really about structural change. I'm so over and past symbolic change. We need structural, transformative change within our within our society itself, and without a means of trying to just say and wear a t-shirt and take the day off, because it's not long term and it's not going to change anything.
So,
Yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate your. Oh.
Yeah, and for me, like I agree with Michael on a lot of what he said. I think in a lot of cases, I'm usually the optimist in the room, and it bites me a lot times more than none. But I think it's important to see it as a point of reflection. Um, the fact that 155 years later, it's now being acknowledged on some level. That's mind numbing and worthy of reflection, in my opinion. And I won't pass on that opportunity, but I agree with Michael on a lot of fronts. But for me, ultimately, I see it as a point of reflection. I see it as a point of reflection for Black people, more so. Like if you're at an organization that's giving the day off, but necessarily you haven't been put in a spotlight or being built to be better in that organization. It's a point of reflection for you, right? It's a point of reflection for non-Black folks to think about, like the fact that this was just 155 years and not much has changed, right? And like I think it's a point of reflection. I like the spotlight on it. The way it's been implemented is not great at all, but I like the spotlight on it in year 2020.
So I think for Michael's point, there's something about companies that normally don't hire a lot of Black people, just throwing out some Juneteenth messaging that just turns your stomach a little bit. So I'm personally not a fan. I kind of agree with Michael that you do want structural change, right? You want change that's meaningful. And then somebody asked, how do we achieve change? And if in terms of tech, I think it's asking companies to instead of making proclamations, do something substantive. Put more money into founding Black technologists, right, and Black technology founders, giving space and making sure that you're hiring underrepresented groups within your organization and actually giving them a meaningful voice and giving them seats at the table, not just telling them that the table's available. So I like the fact that Juneteenth gets would hopefully get recognized as national holiday and national federal holiday. But what would mean more to me is, instead of it being window dressing around talks about inclusion, for it to actually mean something and for companies to actually do what they claim they do in their brochures, right? In their media marketing.
Absolutely. So,
well, I think a lot of that change is actually, I'm going to take the optimist role this time. I think a lot of that change is currently happening thanks to all of the attention Juneteenth is getting. A lot of people didn't know about Juneteenth, which is still amazing to me. But thanks to Juneteenth, we have a lot more people looking up Black artists, Black science people, just educating themselves more than I've really ever seen. Even people are messaging me about people I didn't even know about. And I was like, oh, did you know this Black person made this? And I'm just like, no, but apparently you know. You link me that. But another great example, just because I'm a nerd, I watched a lot of Doctor Who, and in the latest season, there was a whole episode on, sorry, drawing a quick blank because there's so much going on right now. There's a whole episode on Rosa Parks. And a lot of times in the history books, Rosa Parks is definitely whitewashed. She's always shown as this really old, crippled old lady who was in her 60s for some reason, who was just tired and didn't want to get up. And that's whitewashing history because it's safer for people. People feel more comfortable knowing this old lady didn't want to get off. And in reality, Rosa Parks was in her early 30s. And they showed that in the Doctor Who episode. They actually showed Rosa Parks in her real age. They showed her being the badass that she is. And after that episode, a lot of people went and looked up Rosa Parks. And I remember seeing an article that Google, for the first time, Google got oversurge for searches about Rosa Parks. And just that small bit of people looking and seeing this is hopefully making change. That's what I think.
Yeah, I wanted to address
So you
that.
bring up a good point.
I'm sorry. Well, I wanted to interject about what someone was asking about. How do we achieve change? So this is a big part of how and why I push back, and I'm so vehement about this, about pushing back against these kind of like symbolic changes, and about, you know, quote unquote raising awareness. Like we're perpetually trapped in this form of like race 101. And we're always, you know, having to inform, having to educate white people on just the basics of white supremacy. That is for those who are even willing to learn. So when it comes to, I was losing my train of thought. But as far, you know, as far as how to achieve change, I mean, a lot of that has to do with like in the context of technology. We know that a lot of our tech is feeding into this carceral state, and by carceral state, I mean police, I mean prisons, I mean the military, I mean through surveillance. So a lot of the things that we create, that we develop, are really just surveillance tools. And when I talk about comradeship, as you know, earlier, in organizing and unions and things like that, not as a means of like police unions, because I mean those are I mean they are more have more of the interest. They are the state. They have interests of the state. So as far as talking about achieving change, we organize.
Too popular.
Sorry about that, y'all. Yeah, I know, folks keep calling. But how do we achieve change? Is through we organize. We organize. We collectively push back on these projects that we know are awful. We know that facial recognition and voice recognition and collecting data is going to be used against us. So you can't just have this. Well, it's just my job. Like we know that the Nuremberg orders. What what's it called? Nuremberg
The Nuremberg
orders.
trials. The Nuremberg trials.
Yeah. Well, the orders were their response. Their excuse was like, I was just doing my job, and we continue to see that within a lot of folks within tech. So how do we create change? How do we achieve change? That is through, I mean, join a revolutionary or a radical party or organization that is pushing back. I mean, we have the people strike that's coming up. That many radical orgs are doing once a month. Start to develop your politic and to know that we're trying to abolish these systems. So yes, abolish the police. Yes, abolish these prisons, but also find community with folks so that we can build and learn how we can build thriving communities. Like it doesn't have to happen all at once, but how do we achieve change is through making actual material change in defunding the police, making these state and violent systems smaller, shrinking them, shifting those resources towards communities directly who actually need them for mental health, health care, for public schools. You know, like all these other facets of how we live have been defunded and been shifted into police, prisons, courts, and surveillance. So if folks are actually really serious about change, I strongly encourage folks to better understand. What abolition? Abolition. What is it? Aid to Abolition. Aid2abolition.com or Critical Resistance. Like those are two resources to learn about how we can create and achieve change in a way that folks understand, of like shifting resources, money, and power towards communities so that they can actually control and direct them. And you know, even on you know, whatever organization that you're at, you know, like we know that there are anti-democratic organizations. Like most of our organizations, we don't run them. You know, the CEO and the board, they run the shit. We have no say. We have very little say. We try to cry to HR. They're not going to do shit. So trying to shift, you know, push for like actual shared power within organizations is also a way to talk about and to achieve change. So, I mean, it's not going to be polite work and nice work. Like you are going to have to get in folks' faces about it. you are going to have to develop like a principled struggle instead of resorting to all this like liberal form of engagement of like, well, I need to be polite, I need to be nice. I mean, a lot of folks who are immigrants very much understand like you have to be just know your role, shut the fuck up, don't say shit, and do your job. And that is a component of liberalism, is to be nice, so that you don't like, you know, stir things up. And what I'm saying is organize and collectively work with people to engage in struggle, because that is what actually creates change. Ain't nobody was giving a shit or paying attention to Minneapolis until that police station went on fire. So all I'm saying is do some real shit and create change collectively through struggle, not through liberalism, not through politeness, not through being a token and worried about diversity and inclusion and being included into a white supremacist system, as more to just dismantling these systems collectively, to destroy them and to build something from the ground up that actually is about liberation and health, and through our growth and thriving as a people, especially particularly for me working with Black people. So I'm always focused on Black liberation. It's a mouthful, I'm sorry, but yeah. that's yeah. Always
so
put
when you running for presidency, so I just want to know what year I need to be ready to make
Yeah, so that's the thing, is that the presidency is a white liberal manager, or I'm sorry, a white supremacist manager of a white settler colonialist project. So any president that we know of who is running now, any president who has occupied that space, is maintaining a white settler colonialist project of white supremacy to maintain white power, regardless of who it is. I mean, I know there are a lot of folks who love and appreciate Obama. Guess what? He was dropping 72 bombs a day on Black countries, on Black and brown countries. Black Lives Matter happened originally under his watch, and he signed a Blue Lives Matter law to further incriminate Black people, brown people, and indigenous folks, to further criminalize us and to imprison us. So the presidency, I don't really acknowledge as, or validate, because I mean they manage this apparatus to maintain, to maintain like global racial capitalism. They're the reason, a part of why and how, this earth is the way that it is, of how it just sucks up resources, and that is literally killing us. So I think it's less about, let's talk less about hierarchies and how we can and talk more about how we can flatten them, how we can destroy them, how we can collectively build and to organize in ways that are autonomous, and the ways that we can decolonize, so that we can actually build thriving societies, and not presidents, not electoral politics. I mean, that's my focus, is more on Black liberation. So as a part of Black liberation, to dismantle these white supremacist structures, that means to find community with Black people so that we can build societies that which we can thrive.
I like what you said there about the president, right? Like, no matter who's in the office, it's still a white supremacist system. That's kind of how I feel about when tech companies are like, oh yeah, we made the CEO someone who's of color, or they're like, sorry to call Reddit out on this, but like Reddit is like, we're like, the guy stepped down and had someone of color take his place on the board. That still feels to me like that doesn't solve the problem. That's always felt like we put someone in charge to give the illusion that because they're like you, they're going to fight for your interests, and therefore the problem is solved because they're in charge. But they're still upholding a system that has so many threads to it that it's not just a matter of like giving someone power. It's about actually having real power and to change and fix things. So about 10 minutes left before we need to end the stream. So I wanted to give everybody an opportunity to say like a last few words, with this idea in mind of like action items, right? Like, what is an actionable thing that you think someone can do, right? There's a lot of, here are avenues, right? Joining organizations, things like that. What would you say is like something concrete like that? What is a concrete step that you would like to see people in the tech community and the general community do to go also beyond allyship and into camaraderie? So, open to the floor.
I'm gonna just say education, of course. I mean, I'm not gonna pretend like I know everything or have a full understanding of how to perfectly choose the right path for anyone to become a comrade. But I do believe that with intelligence and understanding, a little empathy wouldn't hurt anybody as well. You can make those strides to getting to that point of camaraderie. Yeah.
So I think I think what you can do is everybody has a unique skill that they can use to further, like, not just empower themselves, but empower their communities, right? And so if you're in tech, actively, so I like what Jay's doing. You're building robots, you're showing them to your community, and you're actually getting people excited about that, and that might inspire somebody to join tech. Like Mohit, you facilitating this conversation and actually getting different viewpoints is like super helpful. So I don't, donating money, time to organizations that need it. Whatever you do, you probably have a talent that somebody else can use. Look at the organizations that Michael mentioned. No Name, the rapper, has a book club. Like, she has like a kind of like a recommended reading list. Do the reading, and then donate your time, energy, or resources then to doing some work and affecting change that benefits people overall, and that dismantles systemic racism and discrimination.
Yeah, I think we've touched on a lot of that, or what I was going to say, but I think number one is education. Educate yourself. Number two, be uncomfortable in white supremacist environments, and it be at work or whatever environment you find yourself in, that likes in true diversity, not just face value diversity, but be very uncomfortable with that and do something. I think those two things are really important. Also, I mean, as we grow in our careers, it's important to pull people up as we climb up. I think be a comrade, don't be an ally. Like Michael said, I think there's several ways we can put that to work. For me, growing up in Nigeria, I knew no software engineer at all, and until I met an uncle of mine who was outside the country, and that opened up possibility of that being a valuable career path for me. 13 years later, I'm still in it, right? So I think there's very many opportunities for us to be an example somewhere to somebody, and the best way to be an example is by action. And if I leave with something, be uncomfortable with the same thing. Everything everyone is fighting for now, it just can't die off. We need to be very uncomfortable with environments that promote white supremacy, lack of diversity, true diversity, and environments that are not psychologically safe for anybody. If it's not psychologically safe fundamentally, we're breeding a ground for lack of diversity and lack of trust. So those things are very important to me from my perspective.
Thank you, everybody. This has been really eye-opening. Great getting these perspectives, and I appreciate this kind of shared idea here about making sure people aren't comfortable in this. Like, we shouldn't be okay with this. No one should be okay, and then people shouldn't be shying away from the realities that are facing them. There's a lot of people. This is my call out to everybody on social media about disconnecting from people just because they're posting a lot about what's going on. I think now's not the time to look away. It's time to look at what's happening and realize and try to actually have real empathy and compassion for it beyond just, oh, I think it's bad. They should stop that. It's like, yeah, People have been saying that for hundreds of years, and now I think I'm glad to see this momentum moving. I thank you all again for the ideas of how people can help. I think right boils down, like you all said, to education, and then going out and being involved in some way beyond just words. Jay said something earlier in a post he made, saying that he's not big on just words, right? It's actions. It's by doing, and by showing, right? It's about showing up. It's about being there and beyond what's been going on for years, because like it hadn't done shit. So with that, thank you guys. If you want to stick around after I hit end broadcast, love to have a little debrief with everybody. But for everybody who's watched, thank you again. I will post links to some of the resources that were mentioned. And of course, later today, from about in a half hour, quarantine.today will be having an episode as well, and having a few wonderful guests for that. All right. With that, thanks, guys.
On a quick note, thank you, Mohib. Thank you for setting this up. Seriously.
This was amazing.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you, Mohib. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, guys. I'm glad we could put this together so last minute. All right. With that, I am ending the broadcast.